Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. Today's episode is Death Note Part 1, Episode 8, Glare. The episode in a nutshell is just a brief summary of exactly what happens within this episode. After noticing that Ray's death was the most suspicious of the FBI agents, L sets up surveillance on the households of the people that he was watching, and Light manipulates Ryuk into finding all of the bugs while also still killing criminals in creative ways. After rewatching the episode, we rank each episode on two lists. The first is a mostly objective list, which is void emotion, and then the personal ranking, which is entirely emotion and opinion based. So now we come to our mostly objective rank values, and I am happy to report that this episode had no negatives at all. However, it did only have a couple of positives that I felt applied. The first positive was that we got some multi-arc main character development. We learned that Light is very, very paranoid because he has not one, not two, but three different methods to make sure that he is aware of whether or not somebody is in his room and whether they went in there purposefully or not. The first one is a little piece of paper that he tucks into the door that will of course fall out if somebody enters in. The second one is a piece of lead that he puts into the hinge of the door so that if it is opened without it being removed, the lead will break and hopefully go unnoticed. And then the third method is that the handle sits horizontal when you close the door, and he purposefully moves it 5 millimeters downwards so that if somebody comes into his room, he can tell based on how his traps appear whether they went in there, whether anyone was in there. But then also in the case of this episode where somebody went in and purposely tried to make it look like they hadn't got in, they figured out the paper and put it back, but they did not notice the lead or the door handle, which is what set off Light's suspicion in the first place for him to go and set up his countermeasures for the episode. We also learned that he's manipulative, but we also kind of already knew that. But he does also manipulate Ryuk by using his weakness towards apples against him. More on that later. The other positive for this episode was that it contains one of the more memorable moments within this series, and that is the potato chip bag. Honestly, it's memorable because of how ridiculous it is. It's like when they it's like episode 1. We had the montage of him writing criminals' names, and it was the most dramatic writing scene that has ever been drawn by anybody ever. You know, you have the orchestra, the vocalizing, the wide, large movements. And this scene kind of replicated that with a potato chip bag. You know, he like takes it from the kitchen, he brings it upstairs, and then when he's ready to do it, he just pulls it apart to the orchestra so dramatically. Like, who opens a chip bag like that? Then he puts the chip bag there, and he dramatically, with the orchestra, with the vocalizing all behind him, writes equations with his right hand, or solves equations with his right hand, and then writes names with his left hand as he watches a mini LED TV that's in his chip bag. And then he takes a potato chip and he eats it. Now, this is memorable for the drama of it all, the sheer drama of it all, but also because of the fact that you have to think that Light went out, bought a bag of chips, opened it just oh so carefully, implanted the LED screen, and also taped inside a fragment of the Death Note so that he could write on it, and then went through the trouble of oh so carefully resealing the bag so nobody could tell, and then hiding that bag behind two other bags of chips in the cupboard so that hopefully it wouldn't be eaten by anybody else. All so that he could one-time use this little mini LCD TV and Death Note fragment to make it look like he's killing people without any access to the names of killing people. Like, to go that far, to plan that in advance, to waste that kind of money. It's a memorable moment. It's iconic. It's so light. And that is why it is counted as a positive. And with those two together, that brings us to a total objective score for this episode of 7 out of 10. So as a reminder of our mostly objective ranking list so far, in first place we have Rebirth, Confrontation, Tactics, Pursuit. This episode, Glare, falls into fifth place. Then we have Unraveling, Dealings, and currently in last, Overcast. Now, you may or may not have been able to tell from the mostly objective part, but I greatly enjoyed this episode. It is one of the ones that's like, this is why I watch the series. It's so entertaining. So, special call out that I wanted to give to Watari, who is super nice. He not only gave Elle ice cream at the beginning when they were having their little task force meeting, but he also gave it to all of the other detectives too, which is just really thoughtful. And I want to call out that kind of behavior is very nice. And then, of course, we have basically they're having this meeting, they're going over all the deaths of the FBI agents, and Reyes starts to kind of stand out in that it looks like he's enters the train ticketing area with an envelope, and obviously when he dies there is no envelope, meaning he had to have left it on the train, which we know he did. But also the footage then shows that as he's dying of a heart attack, he is trying to look back at the train. Obviously, something is inside of it. This, of course, is more suspicious than the other FBI agents' deaths, and so this one sends off some alarm bells. Coincidentally, right after they start to think, this is a little bit suspicious, Yukita, who is in the the task force head office back at the police station, calls up Elle and says that there is a phone call that's of interest to them. And he tells him to send it to line 5, which happens to be Matsuda's personal cell phone, which he just oh so casually takes from him and answers the phone. To find out that Ray's fiance, whom he had worked with on the BB murder case in Los Angeles, has gone missing and been missing since the death of her fiance. And this, of course, adds to those suspicions because clearly Kira must have gotten to her first, and when the other task force members suggest that potentially she made a radical choice due to her grief of losing her fiance, Elle immediately discounts that because they'd worked together. He knows that she was a driven FBI agent, very intelligent. That's not the type of reaction she would have had. At least he doesn't think so. And this, of course, puts all the people that Ray was following on spotlight. And this happens to be the deputy director of the Japanese police force, and of course, Suichiro's family, including Light, which we already knew. And so he decides that as that's the most suspicious death, Ray was likely the leak. Therefore, he wants to put in wiretaps and surveillance in both of the homes. The deputy director, he has to do that secretly, but because Suichiro is working with him, he ultimately has to get Suichiro's permission for that. And despite the fact that the other members of the task force are like, no way, that's such an invasion of privacy. You have a wife, you have a daughter. They should not be under this type of surveillance. Suichiro decides that because there's a 5 to 10% chance that one of them could be guilty, it's worth it, and he decides to destroy his family's privacy. But Elle is very nice. He's a kind person. And so he decides that, at least where it comes to the mother and daughter, only he and Soichiro are going to be able to look at that footage. None of the other task force members, because you got to protect that invaded privacy at least a little bit. Meanwhile, while these plans are being put into place, Light has been meticulously scheduling deaths for the next several months in advance so that, should something happen like what is about to happen, no one will be suspicious of the fact that once, the chief's son got under surveillance or went to a hospital or something happened to him, all the deaths suddenly stopped. He's scheduling them out in advance. He does try to confirm with Ryuk whether or not, like, if he accidentally was to, say, book a death that was past the natural lifespan, what exactly would happen in that situation. But as that's not how Shinigami use the death notes, since they're looking for the lifespan and can actually see how much lifespan is left, he doesn't actually know what's going to happen, which is a nice little tidbit, which honestly I forgot should have been probably part of the objective. Oh well, too late now. But just a little side note there. We also see that Light wipes the computer clean so that, if anybody goes and searches the computer, it's not going to look like he's been accessing the files he shouldn't be having access to anyways. He also hides a note piece in his wallet. I mentioned earlier that he is paranoid. Holy shite. Holy. He is paranoid. He's going above and beyond in his paranoia. But anyways, this is all done beforehand. Then he goes out, does his school thing, comes home, goes to his room, notices his door traps have been sprung, and that the piece of paper was put back, which is suspicious because that means that somebody went into his room but didn't want him to know that they had went into his room and had noticed that piece of paper, which sets him off on a paranoia. Of course, Ryuk comes in, he's like, let's play a game. We haven't played a game in a while. We should play a game together. And Light is completely ignoring him until he leaves again. And then once on the street, he checks his clothes, makes sure there's no bugs on that. And once he feels he's safe, he then starts telling Ryuk about how he found this surveillance and blah, blah, blah. Basically informing Ryuk using Ryuk as a sounding board to basically tell us, the audience, what he suspects and about his door, because we wouldn't have been able to pick up on that otherwise. And that wasn't sarcastic. I mean, like, if they didn't tell us, I probably wouldn't have picked up on any of the door traps. Anyways, he goes to a bookstore, he returns home, and as he's returning home, he talks to Ryuk about his apples. We all know that Ryuk really, really, really loves apples. They're his pride, his joy, everything that makes him happy in life. And he is unfortunately informed that as long as the cameras are in place, he's not going to be able to eat them because it's going to look like the apple's floating before he eats it. And he's already given, like, Light has already given L the hint that Shinigami love apples. So, unfortunately, Rook, you're SOL unless you go ahead and find all of the cameras so that if there is a blind spot, maybe you'll be lucky enough that you get to eat the apples. So Ryuk works really hard. He works really, really hard. He searches the entire room through the walls, finding 64 different cameras in his room. Unfortunately, no blind spots, so he's not getting any apples for a while, which so very sad for him. So very sad, in fact, that he actually starts going into withdrawals, which manifest themselves as him twisting around and turning upside down. And while he's having his first set of withdrawals, this is when we have Light dramatically opening the chip bag and dramatically doing his writing of the names while solving equations with his other hand and eating the potato chips so that he had a reason for his hand to be in there in the first place. And when I tell you the music that they put behind this scene is epic. It's a full orchestra with, like, people dramatically vocalizing various words that I don't understand because they're probably in a different language. I don't even know, they could be Latin or something like that. Like, it sounds almost operatic, but like with multiple people. Anyways, the point is, like, this music is so epic for, like, what's really a mundane action happening on screen. I adore this part of this series. I adore the choices to put in this type of dramatic music behind just the most simple things. And even like the exaggeration of the movements of these simple things. Like when you think about it, if someone was to like try to replicate this in reality, and you were to sit there and you were to open a chip bag that dramatically and write that dramatically, you would look like a fool. You would look like a complete fool. But it works in the series because of that background music. That is, it's just amazing. Truly amazing. But unfortunately, all of this kind of backfires on Light because as they're sitting there watching Light, pretend to read porn, but having like zero reaction to it whatsoever, and, sit there and study while he has no access to the TV or the computer or anything like that. Obviously, he is killing two criminals. However, they are very minor criminals, which is kind of out of character for Kira. And that kind of makes Elle think that, it's the first day of surveillance. It's almost like he's too clean. And now you've got minor criminals that aren't really normal, targets for Kira dying just so conveniently while Light is studying. I mean, obviously there's a limit to how suspicious it is because he is on the surveillance, being clean, but that cleanliness and that sort of staged porn reading episode that he did and the other mundane activities, and even like when okay, there's another scene earlier when the family's eating dinner and they're watching a drama and a banner plays about how 1,500 special agents from around the world have been sent to Japan to try to find Kira. And inside his head, Light's like, oh, they're trying to get a response from me. This is like the first trick they tried. It's not gonna work again. And then he proceeds to make a commentary on it about how it's not gonna work. And you're just sitting there like, why didn't you just shut up and not say anything? Honestly, they try to make Light a genius. They tell us he's a genius, and I'm just sitting here like, my mind isn't twisty. I'm not a genius, and even I know better. Come on, do better, Light. But anyways, the point of the matter is, it backfires on him. Al's more suspicious than ever because he's too clean, and it's just the first day of surveillance. And all around, a very amusing, a very entertaining, very excellent episode. So excellent, in fact, that it is a 9 out of 10 on my personal ranking. And having said that, our rankings so far now are: in first place, we have Rebirth, which is the home of our first dramatic writing scene. This episode has made it into second place, Glare, and then it's Pursuit, Confrontation, Tactics, Unraveling, Overcast, and in last place so far, Dealings. Which brings us now to our series ranking, which is our final segment. In the series ranking, we are ranking each of the parts, which we will then compare against each other in order to determine which part is better. And with our score so far, we have now 54 out of 260 on our mostly objective ranking. And then on the personal side, with the addition of 9, we are now at 49 out of 260 so far. With that, we've now rewatched and ranked Death Note Part 1, Episode 8, Glare. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.